The South Carolina Hall of Fame was founded in Myrtle Beach in 1973 to recognize and honor contemporary and past citizens who have made outstanding contributions to South Carolina's heritage, history, and progress. Thomas Green Clemson IV was born in Philadelphia in 1807 to a successful Quaker business family. He completed his early education in Philadelphia and at the age of 15 was sent to the American Literary, Scientific, and Military Academy in Norwich, Vermont.
What he liked best at the school, frankly, was the chemistry class. It was about the only place they taught chemistry in the United States. At the age of 18, he started out for France.
France was really on the cutting edge of science at that time. The early laboratories, scientific method as we think about it today, really evolved through the laboratories that Clemson studied in.
He attended the Sorbonne and the Royal School of Mines. In 1831, he was certified by the French Royal Mint as an assayer of mines.
Really what that meant was he was a mining engineer, he was a geologist, he was a scientist, a naturalist of that era. And that really played a very important part in his later career as he looked at agriculture from a scientific perspective.
Clemson returned to the United States and embarked on a career as a mining engineer and consultant. John C. Calhoun, the fiery South Carolina senator, became his client, and Clemson fell in love with Calhoun's daughter, Anna.
Anna Maria Calhoun was a young lady of 21 when she met Thomas Green Clemson in the nation's capital.
They kept up a correspondence dated throughout the fall and were actually married here at Fort Hill in the parlor in 1838. Clemson in many ways was, I guess, what we would think of today as sort of a city boy. He grew up in an urban environment. He had a practical education of studying the sciences and chemistry, but here at Fort Hill, he had a firsthand opportunity to see agriculture in its process and stages.
Marrying into the Calhoun family also provided political connections. Eager to travel again, Clemson looked to his father-in-law, who was by then Secretary of State and one of the most powerful men in the country. Calhoun helped Clemson receive a diplomatic appointment as the Chargé d'Affaires to the court of King Leopold I in Belgium.
He was the highest-ranking diplomat and negotiated really one of the first trade treaties between the United States and Belgium.
Completing his diplomatic appointment in 1851, Clemson and his family returned to the United States, settling in Bladensburg, Maryland, just a short train ride away from Washington, D.C.
He hung around the Smithsonian because that was sort of the vibrant place where the lines of scientific communication came together, and spent a lot of time there, spoke at the Smithsonian. He was always experimenting with fertilizers on plants, and he would write up all of them and he would publish all of them. So he was right at the front, the cutting edge of his entire generation when people began arguing that we needed to have ag schools in America. He wrote and urged the governor of Maryland to put in an ag school.
As a public intellectual and advocate of education, Clemson witnessed firsthand the growing momentum of the land-grant movement, an effort led by Justin Smith Morrill to establish public agricultural colleges in each state. The first act, known as the Morrill Land-Grant Act, was passed in 1862.
The Land-Grant Act requires 3 things be taught. The first of these is agriculture. The second is mechanics. The purpose of the mechanics is to be able to move the food to the market while it's still fresh, get it there. The third thing that land grants teach is military science and strategy.
In 1860, Clemson was appointed Superintendent of Agricultural Affairs, essentially making him the first acting Secretary of Agriculture. But with the advent of the Civil War, he soon resigned.
He was 54 years old. He had a good federal job in Washington, and he made a conscious decision to come south.
He stayed in Texas, which is known as the Trans-Mississippi Company, and he did the mining, which brought the nitrates to the Mississippi River, across the river, and over to Augusta, which was the main munitions plant for the Confederacy, and there wouldn't have been anything to make without him.
The Civil War left a defeated South in misery and devastation.
This country is in a wretched condition. No money, nothing to sell. Existence is almost problematical. The Negroes utterly demoralized. Murders and robberies are common occurrences. I fear a long time must elapse before the country arrives at a settled state. Everyone is ruined, and those that can are leaving. Thomas Clemson, 1865.
With the end of the old plantation system, the rice culture collapsed, and with that, South Carolina's biggest export. This state was flat broke. It was essentially starting over, and Mr. Clemson could only see it happening through sound agriculture and sound mechanics, A&M.
Back at home, he joined the Pendleton Farmers Society and sought colleagues who might help him create an agricultural college for South Carolina. There was, however, little response. In 1871, the Clemsons suffered the loss of their only two children to have reached adulthood. Floride Elizabeth Clemson Lee died of consumption, and John Calhoun Clemson perished in a train wreck just 17 days later. Distraught, Thomas and Anna left Pendleton and returned to Fort Hill.
I think Anna and Thomas Clemson had long conversations, especially after their children died, about what would be their legacy. What difference could their lives have made?
It was her land which she inherited through the estate of her mother, Mrs. John C. Calhoun, upon which Mr. Clemson had a plan for the establishment of a scientific school for the study of agriculture.
Anna only lived 3 more years. She died in 1875. And Clemson lived at Fort Hill the next 13 years pretty much by himself. He began writing drafts of his will that called for the creation of a high seminary of learning, as we think about it today, in his terms.
Thomas Clemson died in 1888 at the age of 81. It was a year later before his will, with its plans for a public college, would be signed into law by the state.
We began as a school that focused on, if you would, economic development, prosperity for the state of South Carolina. That's Thomas Green Clemson's will calls for us to do that. So those things have guided us all the way through Clemson's development now for 125 years.
The sciences are destined to increase the amount of knowledge in this world far beyond what imagination conceives. The want of adequate scientific instruction is everywhere felt more and more, and as population increases and our fertile lands are exhausted, it will become a necessity. Thomas Clemson, 1859.
Clemson the man was continually looking to improve life, not just for himself, but for those around him. And that kind of person is a dreamer.